Welcome back, everyone, to 4 for 4 Fantasy Football. I'm Mike Randle. You can follow me on Twitter at RandleRant, and we are going to take you today through players that you should avoid in each one of the rounds of your redraft leagues. We had already talked about values, players in each round that we thought were big values that could actually help you win your league at a variety of positions, and we built a roster that we thought we can win with. Now we're going to do the flip side of that coin. What we're going to do is talk about players that you should avoid that are not going to get you closer to winning that fantasy title. Make sure on the YouTube channel here at 4 for 4. So much great content. Make sure you subscribe and you hit that like button, and we can get started here. Let's take a look at the worst values and players you should avoid in each round. First one, the rule of thumb is very simple. You can't win your fantasy draft in the early rounds, but you certainly can lose it. The reason being, the majority of your points are going to come from the early rounds. Those first few players are going to get you the majority of your points for the season. Sure, once in a while we can find somebody in the later rounds, but we can't bust early. The player I have absolutely no exposure to this year is Najee Harris of the Steelers. ADP on Underdog Fantasy is around pick 10, pick 11. He had a spectacular rookie season. 1,150.5 rushing yards is his over-under this year, but he had 1,200 as a rookie. So already Vegas is telling you they expect regression. New QB, same bad offensive line, and have you seen George Pickens in the preseason? I think there's going to be a lot more distribution of passes. I think with Trubisky being a running quarterback, not Roethlisberger, who is a statue, they're not going to dump the ball off to Najee Harris as much. And when you get to the goal line, could Trubisky be running some of the rushes in to get the touchdowns? Absolutely. Najee Harris, I think he's fine, but I think of all the top players in the first round, he is the one who I think has the biggest chance to miss ADP. I would much rather have other players later on in round 2 than Najee Harris avoiding him in round 1. Round 2, Tyreek Hill. Look, we love Tyreek Hill. We love the dynamic speed. We love the explosive output that he can give as a player in fantasy football, but I have no interest. He is changing teams, number one. He is going to more target competition with Jalen Waddle at the wide receiver position. He is a quarterback that has a much weaker arm in Tua, and yes, Tua is very accurate, but I think there are much safer options after Hill. T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Keenan Allen / Mike Williams in a consolidated target share than taking a risk on a wide receiver changing teams. I think there'll be a lot of boom weeks. I think there'll be a lot of bust weeks. That's a best ball player. That is not a player you want to rely on in redraft. You don't want to look down and say, wow, Tyreek Hill really didn't do much these couple weeks. That can kill you and get you the losses in redraft. I have no interest in Tyreek Hill. Round 3, player I'm avoiding, Travis Etienne. There is a chasm of a difference between what we think should happen and what the coaches think should happen. You know that James Robinson was one of the players that I love to pick as a late round value. Why? Because he's still only 24 years old. He has 18 damn touchdowns in the last 2 years, and he's already recovered from the Lisfranc injury, and he is practicing in the preseason. There is no way that Etienne is going to be the lead running back dominating touches here. It's a 50-50 split at worst, and James Robinson could get those high-value touches at the goal line, short yardage work there to get those touchdowns. I am not picking a running back in round 3 who at best I'm projecting for 50-50 here. James Robinson is not gone, and even if he was, you're dealing with a Jaguars offense that is very much a rebuilding offense in the first year under Coach Doug Peterson. So no thank you with Travis Etienne. Round 4, Marquise Brown. No interest in Marquise Brown. And I wrote this up for 4 for 4. We debated here on whether I like him or Deontay Johnson. It's definitely Deontay Johnson. Marquise Brown is going to a Cardinals team where Kyler Murray is a better thrower of the football than what he had with Lamar Jackson. But the trade-off is that he was the dominant target hog in Baltimore, getting the majority of passes. Even so, What you saw with Marquise Brown is he is a diminutive receiver that relies on speed. So if you look at his game log, look at it from last year in the second half, there's a lot of boom bust weeks, a lot of variation. That's not what we want from an early round wide receiver. We want a consistent target share, someone like a Pittman, someone like a Cortland Sutton, those type of players. Plus, DeAndre Hopkins comes back after 6 games. Zach Ertz is there. You have James Conner catching passes out of the backfield, and you have an offense under Cliff Kingsbury with Kyler Murray that has stalled in the second half of the year consistently. No interest in Marquise Brown, changing teams, Hopkins there, not as much of a target share. Yes, a better thrower in Kyler Murray, but that doesn't necessarily translate to big fantasy points. I don't see Marquise Brown as a guy who can finish as a top 12 wide receiver, so why would I take him in round 4? Round 5, David Montgomery. Jacob and Fonnie came on our 4 for 14 preview series here. He thinks it's going to be a shared backfield. I agree. Our own Justin Edwards ranked the Bears offensive line last among all NFL teams. So you have a running back here, Tristan Ebner from Baylor, who they drafted as flashed. You've had Khalil Herbert actually get some touches. He believes it's going to be more of a shared backfield under the new coaching staff. I agree with him. He's in the running back dead zone. He has thrived the last 2 years in the running back dead zone. I'm not going back for a third time with the worst offensive line in football and a new coaching staff. David Montgomery, no bueno, not going for him in round 5. Round 6, Josh Jacobs, similar to Montgomery. You saw flashes there from other running backs. Kenyon Drake is going to be involved. You have players like Zamir White who have actually looked really good. And the kiss of death, Josh Jacobs, the veteran, is playing in the Hall of Fame game and getting substantial touches. Why is that? Because they want to showcase him maybe for a trade, because they want to see what they have in Josh Jacobs. This is an RBBC. This is a new coaching staff with Josh McDaniels, who comes over from the Patriots, which is a team that always does an RBBC. And the rule of thumb with the Patriots was take the cheapest value. You certainly don't take the most expensive value here on a Raiders team in Las Vegas with Josh McDaniels as the head coach when that player played in the Hall of Fame game. Round 7, Antonio Gibson. Big news report this morning that Antonio Gibson looked great in punt protection. Punt protection, that he was actually out there blocking players in the slot. That's what you want from your RB1. J.D. McKissick is there. My friend Josh Larkey pointed out on Twitter that J.D. McKissick, when he's on the field, he drops Antonio Gibson's targets by 2 per game. And it appears that Brian Robinson is already sort of acclimating to the role of the goal line touches, of the touches right at the goal line, those high-valued carries. Antonio Gibson, he is not the preferred option. It looks like it's a 3-headed monster, and his 2 best finishes the last 2 years, RB17 and RB20. That is not the upside we want. The ceiling is capped, so we're passing on Antonio Gibson in round 7. Round 8, Marquez Valdes-Scantling from Kansas City. This is a tough round because there's a lot of players with huge value here. You look at round 8 on Underdog Fantasy, there's a lot of players who could actually be league winners. My problem with Marquez Valdes-Scantling is, what have we heard out of Kansas City? Juju Smith-Schuster's look great. Sky Moore's looked great. Travis Kelce's still there. Isaiah Pacheco is catching passes out of the backfield. Haven't heard a lot about MVS. We've heard that he's dropped passes. We've seen that with Aaron Rodgers. He's the player who's coming to the Chiefs. Yes, Patrick Mahomes is great, but it's not like he didn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback in Green Bay in a situation where they were in dire need for wide receiver production. I think his ceiling is capped. These are the players that I really try to avoid, those that I don't think can really supersede their ADP. They can outperform their ADP. I don't see it. No interest in MVS in round 8. Round 9, Zach Ertz. I'm not buying it. I think there are plenty other tight ends you can go to besides the over 30-year-old Zach Ertz. He was not fantastic with the Cardinals last year. When he came over, he was solid but not great. I think he's very much a Tyler Higbee-like player who can get you decent floor every week but doesn't have that upside. Hopkins comes back in 6 games. Brown comes over, like I said. The passing targets here are distributed all over the place for a head coach in Cliff Kingsbury who prefers to run the ball to begin with. There are much better tight ends later, like an Alberto with Denver, like a Gerald Everett, players who could really outkick their ADP. Noah Fant could be a huge target hog in Seattle. Why would I take Zach Ertz in round 9 with the Cardinals? No interest. Round 10, Garrett Wilson. Very talented receiver for the Jets, but this is an upside play. I think it's limited. He's in a crowded receiving core, and there's questionable quarterback play. Zach Wilson's going to be out for a little bit. He averted a disaster, but if he goes down, we're looking at Joe Flacco. We're looking at Mike White, and there are just too many players on this team. Elijah Moore. There's so many options that they could go to that I don't see Garrett Wilson evolving as a top 20 wide receiver. Other players in this round, in round 10, who I like better than Garrett Wilson, who I could see with that upside. How about Tyler Lockett in Seattle? How about Julio Jones down with Tom Brady? How about McCole Hardman in Kansas City, who's sort of the forgotten guy that has a huge discount? I like him a lot better than MVS. And then, of course, Dameon Pierce, the running back in Houston, who could very much be the starting running back there. There are too many other players in round 10 for me to take Garrett Wilson. Round 11, DeVante Parker. A lot of concern coming out of the Patriots camp. Lack of an offensive coordinator. Who's calling the plays? Mac Jones has struggled a little bit. And to me, Jakobi Meyers is a more reliable receiving option. Jakobi Meyers last year dominated with receptions. He just didn't have touchdowns. You know, touchdowns are not sticky year to year. There could be a lot of positive regression. Here comes Parker changing teams. Michael Gallup goes in this round, round 11, who he could come back and step into a big, big role with Dallas. George Pickens is in this round, as I talked about. I'm very leery of Parker, who really only had one great season, and that's when he was up for a contract. In New England, I'm not interested. Round 12, Jahan Dotson. Another round here, round 12, with superb upside picks. I have Jakobi Meyers in this round. You have Romeo Doubs of Green Bay. You have Alberto. You have Kenny Gainwell. You had the head coach over in Philadelphia wearing a shirt about Kenny Gainwell in the press conference. I like them all better than Dotson. Still questionable quarterback play with Carson Wentz. He is making acrobatic catches in camp, absolutely. But yet in that first preseason game, he wasn't even officially targeted. There was one pass that went to Jahan Dotson, which was negated by a defensive holding penalty. I just would like to see him more involved. I hear the great catches in the preseason. We all hear the drumbeat, but I don't think it's going to translate. Terry McLaurin is still there. Logan Thomas could come back. And the myriad of running backs that catch passes out of the backfield for Carson Wentz. They don't want mistakes with Wentz. Jahan Dotson, deep down the field guy, acrobatic catches. I don't think he has the upside that you should go for in round 12. There's much better options, especially at tight end. Round 13, Jameis Winston, no thank you. I'd much rather have a Matt Ryan. I'd much rather have Mac Jones. You have KJ Hamler in this round. Isaiah McKenzie, who our own John Pawson talked about, loving his upside as a possible slot starting receiver in Buffalo. Michael Carter with the Jets is available. Why would you go Winston here in round 13? He's still turnover prone historically. He's only started 11 games since 2019. He isn't a dominant quarterback returning at the age of 28. He's a guy who in his last full season as a quarterback threw 33 touchdowns, but 30 interceptions. And that was with Bruce Arians, who's a very favorable passing game coach, calling the shots. Different situation, different team, not buying Jameis Winston. I don't see it. I would rather have other quarterbacks and other players like a McKenzie or Hamler who could really outkick their ADP. And the last round for me, folks, who are we going to avoid? This one hurts. Ronald Jones. This used to be Van Jefferson, but his ADP has dropped a little bit. Now it's Rojo. Isaiah Pacheco looks like he's a major issue in camp. Rojo got limited work in practice. He's often running with the 3 and the 4, 3 and 4 running back 3, running back 4 spot, and got limited work in the preseason. Rojo is a 0 in the passing game. We saw that. There's other players in round 14. How about Bob Tunyon with Aaron Rodgers in a limited target share up there? He could get back to his good touchdown red zone focus. How about Daniel Jones even as a rushing quarterback? Brian Robinson, we talked about him with Washington. I'm not taking a running back at the bottom of an RBBC that can't catch passes even in round 14. No, thank you. Folks, there are the players to avoid in each round. What you want are to avoid the bust early, and you want to avoid players with limited upside in the later rounds. That's a recipe for disaster in fantasy football. Here are the players that you should avoid. I'm Mike Randle for 4for4 Fantasy Football.